I returned from Australia after 13 years apart, dreaming of surprising my daughter Jessica in the beautiful Atlanta home I'd bought her. But as I quietly turned my key in the front door, I heard my son-in-law's voice cut through the silence. "If you don't finish those floors in 10 minutes, you won't eat dinner tonight." I froze. Through the doorway, I saw Jessica on her hands and knees, scrubbing baseboards with trembling fingers, wearing a stained uniform that read Rogers Household Staff. They dared to treat my daughter like this? I would make them pay. My name is Fiona Barnes, and this is the story of how I stood up to protect my little girl. Before I share this powerful story about family and justice, comment below with your location and current time. I'm curious to know if you're listening during your morning coffee or winding down for the night. 13 years of working in Australia had been worth every sleepless night. I'd cleaned hotel rooms under that relentless sun, worked graveyard shifts at aged care facilities, saved every dollar, all for this moment. Coming home to surprise Jessica and finally see the house I'd bought for her with my own eyes. The Atlanta streets looked exactly as I remembered as my taxi pulled up to the house on Peachtree Lane. Same dogwood trees lining the sidewalk, same brick facades, same quiet neighborhood where Jessica had always dreamed of building a life. This was the house I'd purchased for her 8 years into my time abroad. My gift to ensure she'd always have a safe place to call home. I stood on the front walkway, hands trembling as I pulled out my key. Jessica had no idea I was coming. This was going to be the surprise of a lifetime. The front door opened silently. I stepped inside, grinning as I prepared to call out, "Surprise, baby girl!" But the word died in my throat when I heard a man's voice from the living room. "If you don't finish those floors in the next 10 minutes, you won't eat dinner tonight." My blood turned to ice. Through the hallway, I saw Jessica on her hands and knees, scrubbing hardwood with a worn rag. She wore a faded gray uniform with words stitched across the pocket that made my stomach lurch. Rogers Household Staff? My daughter, labeled like she belonged to them. Suddenly, Dean's demeanor shifted completely. His face transformed from cold cruelty to a bright smile as he strode toward me with arms outstretched. "Fiona, welcome home," he exclaimed with false warmth. "Jessica was just doing some deep cleaning. You know how she is, always wanting things spotless." Jessica scrambled to her feet, frantically untying the degrading apron and shoving it behind a couch cushion. Her movements were panicked, desperate. "Mom," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her hollow eyes. "I'm fine. Just doing some housework." A voice emerged from the kitchen. Dean's mother, Patricia. "Jessica, dear, don't forget to finish the guest bathroom before you start dinner prep." Dear? The word dripped with false sweetness, but the tone was pure command. Jessica flinched. "Yes, ma'am." I crouched down to hug my daughter, and that's when I saw it. A dark purple bruise wrapping around her forearm, barely hidden beneath her rolled sleeves. "Jessica," I started, but she quickly tugged her sleeves down, shooting me a look that screamed, "Not now, please, not now." Dean clapped my shoulder with practiced familiarity, warning flickering in his eyes despite his smile. "She's been a bit accident-prone lately," he said with a hollow laugh. "You know how it is, always bumping into cabinet corners." Something was very wrong. The confident daughter I had left had become a frightened animal, constantly glancing at her husband for approval. The home I'd purchased to protect her had become her prison. Standing in what should have been a joyful reunion, one thought crystallized with absolute clarity. I needed to find out what had happened to my family. And I had a sinking feeling the truth would be far worse than I could imagine. Dean insisted I stay for dinner, his smile never faltering. "We've got plenty of food. Jessica is an excellent cook." Patricia emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, not the one Jessica had been wearing. Yes, she's learned to prepare meals exactly how we like them. The way she said it made my skin crawl. We gathered in the dining room, a beautiful space with the mahogany table I'd seen in video calls. Dean sat at the head. Patricia took the seat beside him. I sat across from them, leaving the fourth chair for Jessica. But Jessica didn't sit. She stood by the kitchen doorway, hands clasped in front of her, waiting. When Dean nodded, she disappeared into the kitchen and returned with plates of food, serving each of us with trembling hands. "Jessica, honey, sit down," I said, gesturing to the empty chair. "She prefers to make sure everything's perfect first," Dean interjected smoothly, cutting into his chicken. "Don't you, sweetheart?" Jessica's eyes darted to him, then to me. "Yes, I need to check on the dessert." She vanished into the kitchen again. I watched Patricia take a bite, then call out without even turning her head, "Jessica, this chicken is dry. How many times have I told you about the thermometer?" "I'm sorry, ma'am." Jessica's voice floated from the kitchen, small and defeated. "I'll do better next time." "Ma'am?" My daughter was calling this woman ma'am in her own home? When Jessica finally returned with a pitcher of iced tea, I noticed her breathing. Shallow, controlled, like she was trying to make herself invisible. She reached across the table to refill my glass, and her sleeve rode up. Another bruise. This one yellowish-green, older than the purple one I'd seen earlier. Finger marks pressed into her upper arm. "Jessica," I said gently, trying to catch her eye. "Can we talk, just the two of us? Maybe take a walk around the neighborhood like we used to?" Dean's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Mom just got here, babe. Don't be rude. We should all spend time together as a family." I just thought, "Besides," Patricia added, dabbing her mouth with a napkin, "Jessica has to clean up after dinner. The kitchen won't handle itself." Jessica nodded quickly. Too quickly. "It's fine, Mom. Really. We can catch up later." But her eyes said something else entirely. They said, "Help me." I tried twice more during the evening. Once when Jessica was loading the dishwasher, I cornered her by the sink. "Baby, talk to me. What's really going on here?" Her whole body went rigid. Her breathing changed. Faster. Panicked. "Mom, I told you. Everything's fine. I'm just tired." "Fiona," Dean's voice boomed from the living room, "come see these photos from our anniversary trip." Jessica's face went white. "You should go. He doesn't like to be kept waiting." The way she said it, "He doesn't like to be kept waiting," sent ice through my veins. Later, I found a moment when Dean was in the bathroom and Patricia had stepped outside for a phone call. Jessica was folding laundry in the living room, her movements mechanical, practiced. I sat beside her on the couch, reaching for her hand. "Sweetheart, I'm your mother. Whatever's happening, you can tell me. I'm here now. I can help." For just a moment, her fingers squeezed mine, her eyes welled with tears. Then Dean's footsteps echoed down the hallway. Jessica jerked away from me like I'd burned her, grabbing the laundry basket and clutching it to her chest like a shield. When Dean entered the room, she flinched, a full-body recoil that she tried to hide by pretending to adjust the basket. Dean didn't even seem to notice, or maybe he did and just didn't care. As I lay in the guest room that night, the room that should have been Jessica's art studio, I replayed every moment of the evening, every fearful glance, every "yes, ma'am" and "sorry, sir," every time Jessica stood while we sat, served while we ate, cleaned while we relaxed. The truth crashed over me like a wave. My daughter wasn't living as a wife in this house. She was living as a maid. In the house she was enslaved in, the house where she asked permission to speak, where she wore a uniform with someone else's name on it, where she flinched at footsteps, was the one I had bought for her. I had worked 13 years to give her security. Instead, I'd given her a prison. 2 days later, I got my chance. Dean left for a business meeting at 10 a.m., though the whiskey on his breath suggested otherwise. He barely made it to his car without stumbling, his white shirt wrinkled and untucked. "I'll be back by dinner," he called from the doorway. "Make sure the pot roast is ready by 6, and don't burn it this time." Jessica nodded mutely, her eyes fixed on the floor. An hour later, Patricia grabbed her purse, barking orders as she headed for the door. "I'm running errands. The bathrooms need scrubbing, the carpets need vacuuming, and I expect fresh linens on all the beds before I return. Is that clear?" "Yes, ma'am," Jessica whispered. The door slammed shut. For the first time since I'd arrived, the house fell silent. The oppressive presence that had filled every room, that suffocating weight of fear, lifted slightly. Jessica stood frozen in the kitchen, staring at the list of chores Patricia had left on the counter. I walked over slowly, gently placing my hand on her shoulder. "Jessica, sit down with me, please." She flinched, then caught herself. "I can't. I have to finish." "They're gone," I said firmly but softly. "Sit with me, just for a few minutes." Her resistance crumbled. She sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her whole body trembling. I pulled my chair close, taking both her hands in mine. "Talk to me about the bruises," I said, keeping my voice gentle. "And don't tell me you're clumsy. I raised you, remember? You were the most coordinated kid in your ballet class." She shook her head, pulling her hands away, wrapping her arms around herself defensively. "It's nothing, Mom, just accidents. I've been doing a lot of physical work around the house, renovations and—" Jessica Marie Barnes. I used her full name, the name I'd only ever used when she was little and needed to hear the truth, when she needed to know I meant business. Her face crumpled. The dam broke. She collapsed forward, and I caught her, wrapping my arms around my daughter as 13 years of pain poured out in broken sobs. "Oh, Mom," she choked out, using the name from childhood. "I messed up so bad. I messed up so bad." I held her tighter, smoothing her hair like I did when she was small. Tell me everything." Her words came in gasps between sobs. After I got married, I got pregnant, Mom. I was so happy. We were going to have a baby." My heart clenched. She'd never told me this. "But I lost it," she continued, her voice breaking. "At 12 weeks, and after that I fell apart. I couldn't get out of bed, couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. The doctor called it severe depression. Trauma-induced, he said." I stroked her back, letting her speak. "Dean's family said they'd help. Patricia moved in to take care of things while I recovered. They got me medication. Heavy medication, Mom. I was so foggy. Everything was like moving through water. I couldn't think, couldn't focus." Her breathing quickened, panic rising. "They kept bringing papers to my bedside. Insurance forms, they said. Medical authorizations, hospital releases. I was so out of it. I signed whatever they put in front of me because I trusted them." Ice flooded my veins. "What kind of papers, baby?" She pulled back, wiping her face with shaking hands. They told me I'd signed the house over, that I'd given them power of attorney, that I was now their live-in caregiver working off the debt of their help." Rage, white, hot, and fierce, exploded inside me. These monsters had preyed on my daughter at her most vulnerable moment.
"Mom,
They said if I didn't obey, if I tried to leave, they'd prove I was an unfit person, that I was mentally unstable, that no one would believe me. Her whole body shook. So I stayed. I've been their servant in my own home for almost 3 years. 3 years? My daughter had been trapped for 3 years. Jessica, I said, my voice steady despite the fury burning through me. Do you still have those papers? The ones you signed? She hesitated, glancing toward the hallway like Dean might materialize at any moment. Then she stood, walking to a cabinet above the refrigerator, one so high she needed a step stool to reach it. She pulled down a thick manila folder, worn at the edges, and brought it to the table. I kept everything, she said quietly. Medical records, the papers I signed, everything. I kept hoping that someday someone would help me understand what really happened. She placed the folder on the kitchen table between us. My hands trembled as I reached for it. The truth, the full, horrible truth of what they'd done to my daughter was right inside. I spread the contents across the kitchen table like a detective working a case. What I found made my blood run cold. Property transfer documents, dated March 8th, 3 years ago. Jessica's signature, shaky, barely legible, transferring full ownership of the house from her name to Dean Rogers. Power of attorney forms, same date, giving Dean and Patricia complete control over Jessica's medical decisions, financial accounts, and legal matters. Bank authorization papers, March 10th, granting them access to the account where I'd been depositing money for years, money meant for Jessica's security, her future. And worst of all, a typed statement on Rogers' family letterhead. I, Jessica Marie Barnes Rogers, acknowledge receipt of care services provided by the Rogers family during my period of mental incapacity. I understand that I am indebted for said care in the amount of housing, medical expenses, and ongoing support. I agree to provide domestic services as repayment until such debt is satisfied. Her signature at the bottom looked like it had been signed by someone else entirely. The letters slanted wrong. Trails of ink suggesting her hand had shaken violently. I pulled out Jessica's medical records next, scanning through pages of psychiatric notes and prescriptions. March 8th, the same day she'd signed the property transfer. Patient experiencing severe depressive episode following pregnancy loss. Increased dosage of sertraline to 200 milligrams, added lorazepam 2 mg twice daily for acute anxiety. Patient is highly sedated and requires continued monitoring, cognitive function significantly impaired. March 10th, the bank papers. Patient remains in crisis, unable to make coherent decisions. Recommend continued heavy sedation until stabilization occurs. Jessica, I said, my voice shaking with rage. According to these medical notes, you were barely conscious when you signed these papers. Your psychiatrist literally wrote that you couldn't make coherent decisions. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I remember it like a dream, a nightmare. Patricia came to my bedside. I was at their house because I couldn't take care of myself. She had papers. She kept saying, "Sweetheart, these are just formalities, insurance papers. Nothing to worry about. We just need your signature so we can keep helping you. You trust us, don't you? After everything we've done for you?" I was so foggy, Mom.
I could barely hold the pen. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Dean held the paper steady while I signed. Patricia kept saying I was being ungrateful, that after they'd opened their home to me, paid for my doctors, the least I could do was sign some paperwork. Manipulation, coercion, exploitation of a vulnerable person. This wasn't just cruel, this was criminal. I stood up, pacing the kitchen as rage and clarity flooded through me in equal measure. Jessica, this is fraud. This is elder abuse, except you're not elderly. They preyed on your mental incapacity. These signatures aren't legal. You couldn't consent to anything in that state. But they said, I don't care what they said. I turned to face her, placing both hands on her shoulders. I didn't work 13 years in Australia, sleeping in cramped rooms, cleaning toilets, missing every moment of your life. I didn't do all of that to come home to this. My voice grew stronger, more determined with each word.
I will fix everything. Do you hear me? Everything. Hope flickered in her eyes. Dim, fragile, but there. How? I pulled out my phone, scrolling through old contacts until I found the name I needed. Margaret Chen, an old friend from Atlanta who'd gone to law school, now worked as a paralegal at one of the biggest firms in Georgia. She answered on the second ring. Fiona? Fiona Barnes. Oh my God, are you back? I am. And Margaret, I need help. I need the name of the best attorney you know, someone who handles fraud, exploitation, coercion, someone who fights dirty when they need to. There was a pause. How serious are we talking? I looked at Jessica's tear-stained face, at the bruises on her arms, at the stack of fraudulent documents that had stolen her entire life. Serious enough that someone's going to prison when this is over. Margaret's voice turned sharp, professional. I know exactly who you need. His name is Rowan Pierce. He's a shark, Fiona. He destroys people like this for breakfast. I'll text you his number right now. My phone buzzed with the contact information. Thank you, I breathed. Give them hell, Margaret said, before hanging up. I looked at Jessica, squeezing her hand. We're going to see a lawyer, tomorrow, first thing. For the first time in days, something besides fear crossed my daughter's face. It looked almost like hope. Rowan Pierce's office sat on the 20th floor of a gleaming high-rise in downtown Atlanta. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and the reception area was decorated with framed articles. Pierce wins $8 million verdict in elder abuse case. Attorney Rowan Pierce takes down financial predators. He was exactly what we needed. Rowan himself was in his early 50s, salt and pepper hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing. He shook my hand firmly, then Jessica's more gently, noticing how she flinched at the contact. Tell me everything, he said, gesturing to the leather chairs across from his massive desk. I laid out the documents while Jessica sat beside me, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Rowan read in silence, his jaw tightening with each page. When he reached the debt repayment statement, he actually swore under his breath. I'm sorry, he said, looking up at Jessica, but this is one of the most egregious things I've seen in 20 years of practice. He set the papers down, leaning forward on his desk. What we have here is not just a bad marriage or family dispute. This is textbook criminal behavior. He ticked off items on his fingers. Coercion, manipulating someone in a vulnerable mental state to sign documents. Fraud, misrepresenting what those documents were. Financial exploitation, stealing assets from someone legally unable to consent. And domestic servitude, forcing someone to perform labor under threat and duress. Jessica's breath hitched. Hearing it laid out like that, clinical, legal, real, seemed to make it more concrete. But here's what I need, Rowan continued, fixing his sharp gaze at Jessica. Medical confirmation. We need your psychiatrist to testify that you were mentally incapacitated during the time these documents were signed. Can you get that? Jessica nodded. Dr. Sarah Jadens. She treated me through the whole thing. Good. Rowan pulled out his phone. Call her office right now. Tell them it's urgent. 2 hours later, we sat in Dr. Jadens' office at Emory Healthcare. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and an air of clinical precision. She pulled Jessica's thick file from her cabinet, flipping through pages of notes. "Mrs. Rogers," she said gently, "I remember your case very clearly. It was one of the most severe depressive episodes I've treated following pregnancy loss." She turned to a specific page, reading aloud. "March through May of that year, you were on maximum dosages of sertraline, lorazepam, and quietapine. These are heavy medications that severely impair cognitive function, decision-making ability, and memory formation." "What does that mean in practical terms?" I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. Dr. Jaden looked at me directly. "It means your daughter was legally incapacitated. She could not have understood what she was signing. She couldn't have comprehended the consequences of her actions. In the eyes of the law, she had no more capacity to sign those documents than a patient under anesthesia."
She turned to her computer, typing rapidly. "I'm writing a formal letter for your attorney right now. Jessica was not mentally competent to sign anything during that period. These documents should never have been placed in front of her, much less signed under those circumstances." Jessica covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. I thought I was crazy. They kept telling me I'd agreed to everything, that it was my fault for not reading carefully. "No," Dr. Jaden said firmly. "You were medically compromised. What they did was unconscionable." Back in Rowan's office, he read Dr. Jaden's letter twice, his expression growing darker with each word. "This seals it," he said quietly. Then he looked up at both of us, his eyes burning with purpose. "This isn't just a civil case anymore. What we're looking at is human trafficking." The word hit like a physical blow. "Trafficking?" Jessica whispered. "Domestic servitude through coercion and fraud. They exploited your vulnerable state to steal your assets, then forced you into unpaid labor under threat. That's trafficking under federal law. This isn't just about getting your house back. This is about putting them in prison." Rage flooded through me, hotter and more intense than anything I had felt in my entire life. These people had systematically destroyed my daughter's life, stripped her of everything, turned her into a slave in her own home. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice shaking. Rowan stood, walking to the window with his hands clasped behind his back. When he turned, his face was set with determination. "We build an airtight case. Medical records, financial documents, witness statements. I'll file emergency motions to void all contracts and remove Dean from the property. We'll go after power of attorney, property rights, everything." He walked back to his desk, picking up a pen. "I'll also be contacting the FBI. If this is trafficking, it's a federal crime." Jessica's eyes widened. "The FBI?" "Damn right," Rowan's smile was sharp, dangerous. "These people picked the wrong victim." He looked at both of us, and his voice dropped to something fierce and unwavering. "We're going to tear them apart." Everything changed 3 days later. I was in the guest room reviewing legal documents when Jessica's phone started buzzing nonstop. Then mine. Then the doorbell rang once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I rushed downstairs to find Jessica frozen in the living room, staring at her phone with tears streaming down her face. "Mom, we're on TikTok." She turned her phone toward me. A video was playing, shaky footage shot from across the street. In it, Dean stood in the front yard, jabbing his finger at Jessica while she cowered near the mailbox, arms wrapped around herself protectively. His voice came through crystal clear. "Get back in that house and finish what I told you to do, or I swear to God you'll regret it. You're nothing without us. Nothing." The video had been posted by our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, with the caption, "This man abuses his wife daily in our neighborhood. Someone please help her. Hashtag domestic abuse. Hashtag help her." The view count made my stomach drop. 2.3 million views. And climbing. The comment section was exploding. Someone call the police. This is horrifying. That poor woman. I looked up the address. That's Peachtree Lane in Atlanta. Someone needs to check on her now. This is literally domestic violence caught on camera. My phone rang. Then Jessica's. Then the home phone. Local reporters. Within an hour, there were 3 news vans parked on our street. Journalists knocked on the door. A producer from a local news station left her card, begging for an interview. TikTok wasn't the only platform. The video had spread to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Facebook groups dedicated to domestic violence awareness were sharing it. Influencers with millions of followers were commenting on it. The tide was turning. People were watching now. And Dean and Patricia couldn't hide anymore.
Rowan moved fast. He filed emergency motions that same afternoon, immediate void of all property transfers, restoration of Jessica's rights, and, most critically, a temporary removal order forcing Dean out of the home. 2 days later, we stood in a courtroom packed with people who'd seen the viral video. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Morrison, reviewed the medical records, the fraudulent documents, and Dr. Jaden's testimony. Then she watched the video. Her expression hardened. "Mr. Rogers," she said, her voice cutting through the courtroom, "based on the evidence of coercion, mental incapacity, and the clear pattern of abuse documented here, I am issuing a temporary protective order. You are to vacate the residence immediately. You are not to contact Mrs. Jessica Rogers by any means. Violation will result in immediate arrest." Dean's face turned purple with rage, but his lawyer grabbed his arm before he could speak. "This court will reconvene in 30 days for a full hearing," Judge Morrison continued. "Until then, Mrs. Rogers is restored temporary control of the property." The gavel came down. Jessica collapsed against me, sobbing. Dean didn't go quietly. That night, my phone lit up with a voicemail. I put it on speaker so Rowan could hear. Dean's voice came through, slurred with alcohol and shaking with fury. "You think a judge can take what's mine? You think some viral video changes anything? That house is mine. Jessica is mine. And you're just some washed-up old woman who abandoned her daughter. I will burn everything down before I let you take it from me. This isn't over, not even close." Click. Rowan's eyes gleamed. "Save that. Forward it to me immediately. He just violated the protective order and made a direct threat. I'm sending this straight to the police." I forwarded it, my hand steady. Every threat, every piece of evidence. We were collecting it all. The next morning, Patricia showed up. She pounded on the door so hard I thought she'd break it down. When I opened it, she stood on the porch, red-faced and shrieking, "You ruined my son's life! That house belongs to us! We took care of that ungrateful girl when she was useless, and this is how she repays us." "You manipulated a mentally incapacitated woman," I said calmly, standing in the doorway. "You forged documents. You forced her into servitude, and now you're going to pay for it. We gave her everything. You gave her nothing but trauma and bruises. And you know what? I'm not afraid of you. Not anymore. Jessica isn't afraid of you. Your lies, your manipulation, your threats, they don't work anymore." Patricia's face contorted with rage. "We'll see what the courts say." "The courts already said it. Get off this property, now." For a moment, she looked like she might charge at me. Then she saw the neighbors recording. She saw Mrs. Chen filming from across the street. She turned and stormed away, screaming threats over her shoulder. I closed the door, my heart pounding, but I wasn't shaking. For the first time since I'd come home, I felt powerful. The war had begun, and we were going to win. 30 days later, the courtroom was packed, every seat filled. Reporters lined the back wall. People who'd seen the viral video came to witness justice firsthand. Even Mrs. Chen sat in the gallery, nodding encouragingly at Jessica. Dean and Patricia sat with their attorney, stone-faced and rigid. Patricia wore all black, like she was attending a funeral. Dean's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. Judge Morrison entered and the bailiff called the room to order. "We're here today to determine the validity of property transfers and related documents signed by Mrs. Jessica Rogers approximately 3 years ago," the judge began. "Mr. Pierce, you may call your first witness." Rowan stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "The petitioner calls Dr. Sarah Jaden." Dr. Jaden took the stand with quiet authority. Rowan walked her through Jessica's medical history, the miscarriage, the severe depression, the medications. "Doctor, in your professional opinion, was Mrs. Rogers capable of understanding legal documents during March of that year?" "Absolutely not," Dr. Jaden stated firmly. "The combination of medication she was on would have severely impaired her cognitive function, memory, and decision-making ability. She was in no state to comprehend complex legal language or the long-term implications of what she was signing." "Could she have given informed consent?" "No. By any medical or legal standard, she was mentally incapacitated." Dean's attorney tried to shake her testimony on cross-examination, suggesting Jessica was functional enough to sign her name. Dr. Jaden didn't budge. "A person under anesthesia can sometimes respond to stimuli. That doesn't mean they're capable of consent. Mrs. Rogers' condition was similar. She was cognitively impaired to the point of incapacity." The courtroom murmured. Next, Rowan called a handwriting expert who testified that Jessica's signatures on the documents showed signs of extreme distress, shaking, inconsistent pressure, characteristics consistent with someone under duress or heavily medicated. Then came the financial expert who traced every dollar stolen from Jessica's accounts, money I'd sent from Australia, inheritance from her grandmother, her own savings. All of it funneled into Rogers' family accounts. Over $200,000 gone. When it was the defense's turn, Dean's attorney called Patricia to the stand. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue before even sitting down. "Mrs. Rogers," the attorney began gently, "can you explain why you had Jessica sign these documents?" Patricia's voice trembled. "We were just trying to help. She was so sick, so fragile. We thought if we managed things for her, it would take the pressure off. We never meant to hurt her." Fake tears rolled down her cheeks. Judge Morrison's expression didn't change. Rowan stood for cross-examination, and his voice was razor sharp. "Mrs. Rogers, you testified you were trying to help. Is that why you made Jessica wear a uniform with Rogers' household staff embroidered on it?" Patricia's tears stopped. That was just for organization." "Organization?" Rowan pulled out a photo, one I'd taken secretly, Jessica in the uniform scrubbing floors. "Does this look like family helping family, or does this look like forced labor?" Patricia's mouth opened and closed. "And these documents you claim were for Jessica's benefit, did you explain that she was signing away her home, her inheritance, her autonomy?" "She knew. She was medically incapacitated. As Dr. Jaden testified, you exploited a vulnerable woman for financial gain." Rowan's voice grew harder. "You turned her into your servant and called it help." Patricia's fake tears turned to real anger. "She was useless. We gave her everything." "Thank you. No further questions." The courtroom buzzed. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "Order." She reviewed the documents one final time, then looked up. "I've seen enough. The medical evidence is clear. Mrs. Jessica Rogers was mentally incapacitated and legally unable to consent to these documents. Therefore, I rule as follows." My heart pounded. "All property transfers are hereby voided. The house on Peachtree Lane is restored to Mrs. Jessica Rogers' sole ownership. All power of attorney documents are declared invalid. Bank accounts are to be restored immediately." Jessica grabbed my hand, squeezing hard. "Furthermore, I am issuing a permanent restraining order. Mr. Dean Rogers and Mrs. Patricia Rogers are prohibited from contacting Mrs. Jessica Rogers or coming within 500 feet of her residence." Judge Morrison's voice grew colder. "I am also referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. The evidence suggests fraud, coercion, financial exploitation, and domestic servitude. Criminal charges will follow. The gavel came down with finality. The courtroom erupted. People clapped. Reporters rushed out to file their stories. I pulled Jessica into my arms and she collapsed against me, sobbing with relief. "It's over," I whispered. "You're free." But when I looked up, I saw Dean staring at us from across the courtroom. His face was twisted with pure hatred. His eyes burned with something dark and dangerous. He mouthed 2 words at Jessica. "Not over." A chill ran down my spine. The legal battle was won, but something told me the real danger was just beginning. It happened 3 nights later. A storm rolled in just after sunset, the kind that shakes windows and turns the sky black. Thunder rumbled in the distance as rain hammered the roof. The power flickered once, twice, then steadied. Jessica and I were in the living room, finally beginning to breathe, finally allowing ourselves to believe it was over. Then the lights went out completely. "Mom?" Jessica's voice cut through the darkness. "It's okay," I said, reaching for my phone's flashlight. "Just the storm." The crash of breaking glass from the kitchen made us both freeze. Heavy footsteps, fast, deliberate. "Jessica!" Dean's voice exploded through the house like a bomb. Jessica screamed. I heard him slam the back door shut, heard the deadbolt slide into place. Then the front door, lock, chain, that bolt. He was sealing us in. "You think you can take everything from me?" Dean's silhouette appeared in the kitchen doorway, backlit by lightning. His voice was raw, unhinged. "You think some judge can tell me what's mine?" "Dean, get out!" I shouted, positioning myself between him and Jessica. "You're violating a restraining order." "I don't care about the restraining order." He lunged forward and I saw his face in the phone's light, spit flying. "She belongs to me. This house is mine. Everything is mine." Jessica backed toward the stairs, her breathing fast and panicked. "Dean, please." "Please," he laughed. A horrible sound. "You've been saying please for 3 years. Where did that get you? Now you bring your mother back and ruin everything?" He moved toward her. Something primal ignited in me. 13 years of distance, of guilt, of failing to protect my daughter. No more. I grabbed the heavy table lamp beside me and swung it with everything I had. It connected with Dean's shoulder. He roared in pain and rage, spinning toward me. "You old fool." He grabbed my arm, his grip crushing. I didn't care. I fought. I clawed at his face, kicked at his legs, screamed for Jessica to run. But there was nowhere to run. He'd locked all the doors. Jessica grabbed a fireplace poker, swinging wildly. "Get away from her. Get away." Dean shoved me hard. I crashed into the coffee table, pan exploding through my back. He turned on Jessica, advancing like a predator. "This ends tonight. If I can't have you, no one will." Jessica swung the poker. It caught his arm with a sickening crack. He howled, stumbling back. In that moment, I heard it. Sirens. Distant, but getting closer. "No!" Dean roared. He grabbed Jessica by the throat, slamming her against the wall. "You called them? You called them?" "I hit the panic button," I gasped from the floor, holding up my phone. Rowan had insisted we install a direct line to police. "They're coming for you!" The sirens grew louder. Dean's eyes were those of a cornered animal, desperate, dangerous. His hands tightened around Jessica's throat. She clawed at his fingers, gasping, her face turning red. I threw myself at him, grabbing his hair, his shirt, anything I could reach. "Let her go!" The front door exploded inward. "Police! Hands up!" Officers flooded in, flashlights cutting through the darkness. 2 of them tackled Dean, ripping him away from Jessica. She collapsed to the floor, coughing and sobbing. Dean fought like a wild animal, screaming obscenities, threatening everyone. It took 3 officers to restrain him. You're both dead! You hear me? Dead! They dragged him out, still screaming, into the storm. I crawled to Jessica, pulling her into my arms. She shook uncontrollably, her whole body racked with sobs. "You're safe," I whispered to her, holding her as tight as I could, feeling her heartbeat against mine. "You're safe now, baby. I've got you." And this time, I meant it. This time, I wasn't letting go. 6 months later, I stood in the same courtroom where our nightmare had begun to end. This time, it was packed with media. The case had made national headlines. Georgia trafficking case exposes domestic servitude ring. Mother returns from Australia to save daughter from in-laws abuse. Every major outlet covered it. Judge Morrison sat behind her bench reviewing the final documents. Dean stood in an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed. The wild rage was gone, replaced by empty defeat. Patricia stood beside him, looking 20 years older than she had 6 months ago. "Mr. Dean Rogers, you have been found guilty of fraud, coercion, financial exploitation, domestic violence, and human trafficking. You exploited your wife's mental vulnerability, stole her assets, and subjected her to years of forced labor and abuse." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "I hereby sentence you to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 10 years of supervised release. You are ordered to pay $287,000 in restitution to Mrs. Jessica Rogers." Dean's head dropped. "Mrs. Patricia Rogers, you enabled and participated in this exploitation. You are sentenced to 5 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $150,000 in restitution." Patricia's lawyer started to object, but she waved him off, her face blank. "Furthermore," Judge Morrison added, "all Rogers family assets used in this scheme are hereby seized and liquidated to satisfy the restitution orders." The gavel came down. It was over. Really, truly over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Rowan handled most of the questions, but one journalist pushed through to Jessica. "Mrs. Rogers, how does it feel to finally have justice?" Jessica looked at me, then back at the reporter. "It feels like I can breathe again." The footage would air that night on every major network. The case became a landmark, used in training for social workers, law enforcement, and domestic violence advocates. Our story helped change how the system recognized domestic servitude. But for us, the real work was just beginning. Jessica's name was restored on the property deed, fully, legally, permanently. The bank accounts weren't frozen. Every dollar stolen was returned with interest. We even received damages beyond what was taken. I applied for permanent residency and got it within weeks. My visa allowed me to stay indefinitely. I wasn't going anywhere. 13 years abroad was enough. I was home now, and I was staying. We spent the next few months transforming the house. We ripped out the carpet Patricia had demanded Jessica scrub weekly. We painted over the cold gray walls with warm yellows and soft blues. We donated the staff uniform to a local domestic violence organization as evidence of what survivors endure. In the guest room, the one that should have been Jessica's art studio, we set up canvases, paints, and an easel. Jessica hadn't painted since before the miscarriage. But one morning, I found her standing in front of a blank canvas, brush in hand, tears streaming down her face. "I forgot what this felt like," she whispered. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. "Then remember." She started therapy twice a week with a trauma specialist. Some days were hard. She'd flinch at loud noises. She'd apologize for things that didn't need apologies. But slowly, week by week, I watched my daughter come back to life.
We planted a garden in the backyard. We cooked meals together without fear. We sat on the furniture she'd once been forbidden to touch. We laughed. One evening, as the sun set over Atlanta, Jessica and I sat on the porch with sweet tea in our hands. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. "Mom," Jessica said softly, "thank you for everything, for coming home, for fighting, for not giving up on me." I took her hand, squeezing gently. "Baby, I left for 13 years to give you a better life. I returned to save it. And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we watched the sky turn orange and pink. Somewhere in the distance, a wind chime sang. For the first time in years, we were both free. And this time, we were staying that way. If this story touched you, please share it. Domestic servitude and coercion happen more often than we think, hidden behind closed doors, disguised as family help. If you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, reach out. You deserve freedom. You deserve safety, and you are never, ever alone. Drop a comment below sharing where you're watching from, and let's keep this conversation going. Together, we can shine light into the darkest places.